I killed him with my own hands, in front of the golden throne hall. The moment the sword pierced his chest, I saw his widened eyes filled with disbelief. He couldn't understand, even in death, how the woman who was once completely obedient to him, who loved him to the point of debasing herself to dust, could turn into a life-claiming, vengeful ghost. But he didn't know. I had crawled back from hell, with the memories of my past life, with the deep-seated blood feud of the 103 members of the Shen family, with the cries of my 7-month-old child whom he poisoned with his own hands. I had my rebirth. Reborn on the afternoon he and his white moonlight were making love in the carriage I had prepared. Please make sure you are in a comfortable position. We'll begin the main story shortly. Leave a comment below, and tell us which city you read our story in. The spring sunlight streamed in through the window lattice as I was fixing my makeup in front of the bronze mirror. Today was the day Murong Jin would go to the palace for an audience with the emperor, so I had specially ordered his favorite gilded and jade inlaid carriage to be prepared, and also made his favorite pastries. All right, I'll go now. I gave my reflection in the mirror a gentle smile. What a beautiful face. A pity she loved the wrong person. Carrying a food box, I walked outside the manor gate and saw the carriage parked under a phoenix tree from a distance. Strangely, the curtains were tightly drawn, and the carriage was shaking slightly. My steps slowed down. Memories came flooding back like a tide on this day in my past life. I was filled with joy thinking my husband had come to pick me up. But I walked in on the shameful affair between him and my half-sister in the carriage. I lunged forward like a madwoman to tear at the carriage curtain, and in return he kicked me in the chest, his eyes filled with loathing. Chinrahua, do you have any semblance of a Shizi's wife? Wangsun's body is weak. She can't handle being frightened. If you dare to make a scene again, don't blame me for being ruthless. That kick shattered all my illusions. Later, Bai Wangshen got out of the carriage with tears streaming down her face like pear blossoms in the rain, and said timidly, "Sister-in-law, it is all my fault. Please don't blame my cousin." The surrounding servants pointed and gossiped, saying I was jealous, that I was a shrew, that a merchant's daughter like me was not worthy of the noble and virtuous Shizi. I became the laughingstock of the entire capital, but I still loved him humbly. For him, I restrained my sharp edges, washed my hands to make soup, managed the entire general's mansion, respected my parents-in-law, and even handed over the vast wealth of the Qin family, all to help him achieve success. I thought that one day I could move him. But what did I get in return? It was the Qin family, framed for collaborating with the enemy in treason, their entire clan executed. It was my 7-month-old unborn child, forced to drink an abortifacient, by his own hands, turning into a pool of blood. Before I died, I saw him dressed in a brand new top scholar's red robe, with a grand wedding procession, marrying the newly crowned emperor's personally appointed Princess Changning, Bai Wangshen. Stepping on the corpses of the 103 members of the Qin family, he ascended to the pinnacle of power. Turns out, this was a setup from the very beginning, a colossal conspiracy targeting the Qin family. Overwhelming hatred made me crawl back from hell. In this life, I will not cry again. I stood on the spot, watching that shaking carriage, the corners of my mouth curling into a cold arc. Chun Tao, my personal maid, Chun Tao, came running over. "Madam, go get Chinan, bring all the guards and have them carry this carriage, exactly as it is, to the entrance of the imperial palace for me." Chun Tao's face turned deathly pale. "Madam, you absolutely must not do this. The young lord is inside. If you make a scene at the palace gates, what will become of the general's manor's reputation, and what will become of yours?" I chuckled lightly. My reputation. He already tore it to shreds when he was rolling around in bed with another woman. Now, I am just going to pick up the pieces and give him a big gift while I am at it. The look in my eyes was cold and resolute. Chinan, the head of the guards who had watched me grow up, seeing that my mind was made up, gritted his teeth and replied, "Yes, miss." He didn't call me madam, but miss. From this moment on, I was no longer Qin Ruhua, the wife of the heir of the general's manor, but Qin Ruhua, the eldest young lady of the Qin family. The Qin family are imperial merchants. Their wealth could rival a nation. There were over 50 guards who came with my dowry, and every one of them is a skilled fighter. With a single order, dozens of guards in practical attire filed out, surrounding the luxurious carriage so tightly that nothing could get through. The commotion inside the carriage came to an abrupt halt. Who is out there? Mirangjin's alert voice came through. No one answered. The guards passed thick poles under the carriage, and with dozens of them exerting force at the same time, they actually lifted the heavy carriage, along with the people inside, steadily into the air. Insolent, are you trying to rebel? Mirangjin roared inside the carriage, trying to rush out, only to find the carriage door had long been jammed shut. The carriage shook violently, and Bai Wangxin's scream rang out. Ah, cousin, I am so scared. Don't be scared, Wangxin. I am here. He was still comforting her in a gentle voice. How ridiculous. I watched all of this coldly, turned and boarded another carriage, and only gave a faint command to the imperial palace. The procession of carriages headed majestically towards the imperial palace. Along the way, this strange sight attracted countless commoners to watch. A carriage being carried by dozens of guards, still shaking continuously, with the panicked screams of a man and a woman coming from inside, could be called the spectacle of the century in the capital. Which family is this, and what are they doing? Listen, it sounds like there is a woman screaming inside. Heavens, I just heard the voice of the young lord of the general's manor. The sounds of discussion surged in like a tide. I sat calmly in the carriage, holding warm tea in my hand, as steady as a mountain. Mirangjin, don't you love your face the most? Don't you care the most about your pristine reputation as the #1 young master of the capital? Today I will tear off this hypocritical painted skin of yours, layer by layer, in front of the whole world. Soon we arrived at the palace gate. Today is the 15th, the day of the court assembly. The civil and military officials have just left court, walking out from the palace gate in 2s and 3s. I timed it perfectly. Stop. The guards stopped in unison, placing the horse carriage heavily in the very center of the square, before the palace gate, perfectly blocking the officials' path. All eyes were drawn over. I stepped gracefully from the carriage, in a simple and elegant dress, wearing no makeup. Yet it was hard to hide my city-toppling beauty. It is just that those eyes, usually full of tender affection, were now filled with chilling ice. I walked straight to the front of the horse carriage and spoke in a clear voice. My voice wasn't loud yet. It reached everyone's ears clearly. Husband Mirangjin, has the bumping in the carriage stopped? Among the officials, several colleagues who were on good terms with Mirangjin all showed looks of astonishment. General of the state, my father-in-law, was standing at the very front of the crowd, his old face instantly turning the color of a pig's liver. Qin Ru Hua, he roared. What madness are you up to here? Get out of the way now. I ignored him, just continuing to speak to the carriage door. My dear husband and cousin Bai were getting it on in the carriage. You must be tired. I specially invited you to the palace gate to get some fresh air and sober up. Guess what? Did the emperor praise the memorial you submitted at court this morning? Guess what those colleagues who usually praise your noble character would think if they saw you like this now? My voice was calm and steady, yet every word was a stab to the heart. The crowd exploded. What? Young Master Morong and Miss Bai are in the carriage? Heavens, this is an unheard of scandal. The general's residence has completely lost face this time. The general of state pacification was trembling with rage, pointing at me, unable to speak for a long while. You venomous woman. Just then, the carriage door was suddenly kicked open. Mirangjin, with his clothes disheveled and hair messy, rushed out. His eyes were bloodshot, like a man-eating beast glaring at me. Qin Ruhua, how dare you do this to me? Following him, Bai Wangxin, equally disheveled and crying her eyes out, stumbled out. The moment she saw the scene, she let out a scream and fainted in Mirangjin's arms. What a delicate white lotus. I looked at Mirangjin. He was wearing the brocade robe I had sewn for him by hand, now full of wrinkles with a glaring lipstick mark still on the collar. Why wouldn't I dare? I slowly smiled, a smile filled with endless mockery and sorrow. Mirangjin, my Qin family paved the way for you, helping you rise rapidly through the ranks. I managed the household for you so you had no worries. I even gave up my own pride. But what about you? How did you treat me? You took my efforts for granted and trampled my love underfoot. You were out being all lovey-dovey with your white moonlight, and yet you expected me to uphold a facade of chastity for you. Mirangjin, what gives you the right? My voice suddenly rose, clear and resolute. echoing across the entire palace gate square. Today, I Qin Ruhua, am here to tell you in front of the entire imperial court. I enunciated each word, my voice resounding. I want to divorce you, Murong Jin. From now on, we go our separate ways in marriage. You take your high road, and I'll take my single-plank bridge. In this life and forever, we have nothing to do with each other. After speaking, I pulled out the divorce papers I had already written from my robes and viciously threw them in Murong Jin's face. The paper fluttered down lightly, yet it was like a loud slap hitting his face, hitting the face of the general's manner. Murong Jin was completely stunned. He had never imagined that the Qin Ruhua who had been so obedient and loved him to the bone would deal him a fatal blow in such a tragic and resolute manner. He looked at me, his eyes filled with shock, anger, and a hint of panic that even he himself didn't notice. But I didn't even spare him another glance, turning around surrounded by my guards and leaving without looking back. Behind me were the whispers of all the court officials, the thunderous rage of the general of the state, and Murong Jin's suppressed roar. None of this had anything to do with me anymore. Returning to the Qin mansion, my father and older brother were already waiting for me in the main hall. "Ahua, you were too reckless," my father said, deeply distressed. "After making a scene like that, what about your reputation? How will you ever marry again?" I knelt before my father and kowtowed heavily. "Father, your daughter has been unfilial, but if I hadn't done this, I am afraid I would have died in the general's mansion." I raised my head, my eyes filled with inconsolable sorrow. "Your daughter married the wrong man. I was a poor judge of character. Please punish me, father." My older brother Qin Mo quickly helped me up, frowning as he said, "What nonsense are you talking about? That bastard Murong Jin is the one who did such a shameful thing. It is his fault. What does it have to do with you? It is just that this divorce probably won't be that simple. The general's mansion won't let go so easily. They're still counting on our Qin family's financial resources." I sneered. "Whether they let go or not, it is not up to them. Brother Dad, from this day on, all business dealings between the Qin family and the general's manor are to be completely cut off. All the connections we've placed around Murong Jin to pave his way are to be withdrawn. I want to make him fall from the clouds into the mud and see how he can still be so lofty and arrogant without the Qin family's support." Father was stunned. He had never seen me like this. In his impression, I had always been a naive and pampered daughter, held in the palm of his hand. "Ahua, Dad," I interrupted him, my tone sincere. "Trust me this once. Your daughter won't be foolish again. Our Qin family cannot become a ladder for others to climb to the heavens, only to end up being discarded like a spent tool. Lit, when the cunning hare dies, the hound is boiled." The phrase "discarded like a spent tool" made Father's expression instantly solemn. He was a shrewd businessman and immediately smelled danger. He pondered for a long time and finally slammed the table. "Fine, we'll do as you say. My Qin family's daughter will absolutely not suffer this kind of grievance. What does his general's manor amount to without our Qin family? I'd like to see how they'll gain a foothold in the court." Having gained his support, my heart settled down a bit. The first step of revenge had been taken, and what followed was a long and arduous war. Sure enough, the next day the General of National Defense brought Murong Jin to our door in person to apologize. I couldn't even be bothered to see them, and only had the butler relay a message. "The divorce papers have been issued. The Qin and Mu families have no further connection. Please leave." Murong Jin stood outside the door for a full 2 hours before being forcibly dragged away by the general. I stood by the second-floor window, coldly watching his retreating back. He seemed to sense something, suddenly turning back to look at me. Our eyes met. I could see the unwillingness and probing in his eyes. He couldn't understand why I had changed so much. "Murong Jin, a taste of hell will turn a naive woman into a life-claiming vengeful ghost." Soon my revenge of cutting them off at the source began to show its effects. The Qin family cut off all financial support to the general's manor, and several of Murong Jin's important projects in the imperial court immediately stalled. Those officials who had been friendly with him for the Qin family's sake now also began to keep their distance. His previously smooth-sailing life encountered a huge obstacle for the first time. He started frequently visiting the Qin manor, sometimes with expensive gifts, sometimes with sincere and heartfelt letters, trying to win them back. The gifts, I returned them untouched. The letters, I didn't even look at them, just threw them straight into the brazier. The more anxious he got, the calmer I became. I knew this was far from enough. What I wanted was to ruin his reputation and bring him to disgrace, to make the entire general's manor be buried along with my Qin family. I began to use the memories from my past life to lay out my plans for the future. I know that in 3 months, Jiangnan will have a huge flood. The imperial court's disaster relief will be incompetent, and the people's resentment will boil over. In the end, it is Murong Jin who will propose the brilliant plan of providing work as relief, which not only solves the disaster, but also builds important water conservancy projects, thus earning the emperor's praise and a promotion of 1 rank. This life, I am taking this credit. I had my elder brother Qin Mo use the Qin family's name to hoard large quantities of grain and medicinal herbs in Jiangnan in advance, and also to recruit artisans to draw up detailed water conservancy blueprints. At the same time, I began to manage the Qin family's businesses. In my past life, I handed over our immense family fortune to Murong Jin, yet I myself was completely clueless about business. This life, I took up my father's teachings from my childhood and began to show an astonishing talent for business. I used my foreknowledge of future price trends to precisely invest in several businesses with huge potential: spices, maritime shipping, and tea. In just 2 short months, the Qin family's wealth doubled. I am no longer that clinging vine hiding behind a man, needing to depend on others. Using my own abilities, I made the name Qin Ruhua rise to fame in the capital's business circles. A woman showing her face in public drew a lot of criticism, but I couldn't care less. My reputation was already torn to shreds by my own hands that day, at the palace gate. Now, all I want is tangible power and wealth. Meanwhile, life was getting harder and harder for Murong Jin. Without the Qin family's support, he was at his wit's end. Although the general's manor had a solid foundation, it had been considerably hollowed out by the father and son duo's ambitions over the years. Now that the funding chain was broken, he was immediately strapped for cash. What made him even more miserable was my change. He couldn't accept that the woman who once had eyes only for him now treated him as if he were invisible, and was even more dazzling than him in her career. The man's pride was greatly challenged. One time, while I was out inspecting the shops, he intercepted my horse carriage on the road. "Qin Ruhua, what on earth do you want?" He stood in front of the carriage, his figure haggard, but his gaze was still sharp. I lifted the carriage curtain and looked at him coldly. "Young Lord Murong, I believe I've made myself very clear. We are already divorced," he sneered. "I didn't sign that paper, and the authorities haven't registered it, so it doesn't count. If you are my wife for 1 day, you are my wife for life. Is that so?" I slightly raised an eyebrow. "Then what about you cheating during our marriage, fornicating with your cousin, and being caught at the palace gates, bringing shame upon the royal family? How should we settle that score? Murong Jin, do you really think the emperor would offend me, the god of wealth who now controls the purse strings of half the country for your sake?" Yes, as the Qin family's business expanded, and with the charitable acts I orchestrated before the Jiangnan floods, the emperor had already taken notice of me. He had summoned my father several times, and his words often carried the intention of winning us over. A family that can stabilize the nation's economic lifeline carries far more weight than a notorious general's manor. Murong Jin's expression turned extremely ugly. He clenched his fists tightly and said word by word, "Ruhua, I know I was wrong. Come back. As long as you come back, I promise I'll never see Bai Wangxin again. I can send her away." "Send her away?" I laughed until tears almost came out. "Murong Jin, do you think the problem is just about one Bai Wangxin? The problem is you. It is your selfishness, your hypocrisy, your wolfish ambition. What did you take my Qin family for? A stepping stone, to be kicked aside after you were done with us." My questioning left him speechless. "Ruhua, give me one more chance." He softened his stance, his voice even carrying a plea. If this were my past life, my heart would have probably melted upon hearing those words, but now I only feel disgusted. A chance. I dropped my smile, my gaze as cold as ice. "Sure, kneel down now, and from here kowtow every 3 steps, all the way to the Qin family's gate. Maybe then I'll consider letting you in to pour me a cup of tea." His face instantly flushed red, as if he had been greatly insulted. Qinruhua, don't you push it too far? So what if I am bullying you? What can you do about it? I lowered the carriage curtain, my voice coming out cold. Murongjin, it has long been over between us. What you should be doing right now is not begging me, but thinking about how to save your official position, how to save your general's residence's century-old foundation. Giddy up, the carriage drove past him, and I didn't look back. I knew these words would thoroughly enrage him, and also shatter the last illusion he had of me. Very good, only a beast forced into a desperate situation will reveal its deadliest fangs. And I was just waiting for the moment he showed his fangs. The Jiangnan flood arrived as expected. The imperial court was in a flurry, and the disaster relief officials sent were corrupt and incompetent, causing the disaster to worsen. Just as the court was in a state of anxiety, my elder brother Qin Mo presented a memorial to the court with my plan, and all the preparations. Not only did he offer hundreds of thousands of shi of grain, and a large amount of medicinal herbs, enough to solve the urgent crisis, but he also presented a detailed plan for water conservancy construction using a work relief program. The dragon's heart was greatly pleased. The emperor immediately ordered that Qin Mo be solely responsible for the Jiangnan disaster relief, and promoted him to vice minister of the Ministry of Works. The Qin family officially stepped into the core of the imperial court for the first time, and Murongjin, the one who was supposed to shine with this plan, could now only watch as the glory that should have been his fell into the hands of the merchant family he despised the most. I could imagine how furious and unwilling he must be. As expected, he started to fight back. He teamed up with several imperial censors to submit a memorial impeaching me and the Qin family, saying we spread bewitching fallacies to delude the masses and predicted natural disasters in advance, which was an inauspicious sign. He also said we hoarded goods for speculation and disrupted the market, and that our intentions were punishable by death. These charges could be major or minor. To put it lightly, it is commercial speculation. To put it seriously, it is shaking the very foundation of the country. In my past life, he used similar charges to frame us for the capital crime of colluding with the enemy and betraying the country. This life, I was already prepared. On the day after the censor's impeachment, I sought an audience with the emperor as the eldest young lady of the Qin family. I knelt outside the imperial study for 4 hours before I was finally granted an audience. Qinruhua, the emperor looked at me, his gaze profound. Do you know of your crime? I bowed and kowtowed, neither servile nor overbearing. Your subject does not know. If I must speak of a crime, then my crime is in being a woman who has glimpsed the secrets of heaven, and in being a merchant who cares for the common people. If these are crimes, then your subject is willing to accept punishment. Oh, the emperor became interested. How did you see through the heavenly secrets? I took a booklet out of my sleeve and presented it. Your Majesty, this is not a heavenly secret, but a pattern. This is a record of the local customs, hydrology, and climate changes from all over, which my father, your humble servant, noted down during his many years of traveling as a merchant. The booklet records that along the Jiangnan coast, there is always a great flood in the years of Jiazi and Jiangwu, and this year happens to be Jiangwu. As for hoarding for speculation, that is even more nonsensical. Your humble servant merely transported grain near the disaster areas in advance so that it could be readily available. If not for that, who knows how many common people would have starved to death by the time the court's relief grain arrived. Everything I, your humble servant, have done was to share your worries and relieve the people's suffering. What crime is there in that? My words were reasonable and well-founded, and that thick booklet was the most powerful proof. The emperor flipped through it, his expression growing more solemn the more he looked. He was a capable monarch, so he could naturally see the value of this booklet. Good, what a good Qinruhua. A flash of admiration appeared in his draconic eyes. Not only do you have a talent for business, but you also possess a world-shocking strategy. What reward do you want? I kowtowed again, my voice clear and cold. Your humble servant does not seek a reward, only a measure of justice. Justice? Yes. I raised my head and looked directly at the emperor. This humble servant and Murongjin, the heir of the general's manor, have long since severed all ties of affection and duty. The incident at the palace gates is known to all. However, Murongjin continues to pester me endlessly, and the general's manor also refuses to let go. Now, Jin has even colluded with the censor to slander this humble servant and the Qin family. This humble servant beseeches your majesty to issue an edict, permitting me to formally separate from Jin, so that we may part on good terms and have nothing to do with each other ever again. What I want is this complete freedom, personally granted by the emperor. The emperor was silent. He was weighing his options on one side, the infamous and declining general's manor, and on the other, the wealthy Qin family, who had performed great deeds and had a limitless future. This wasn't a difficult choice to make, granted. His word was law. We will issue a decree for the Ministry of Rights to draft your annulment papers and announce it to the world. From now on you, Qin Ruhua, will have no more ties with the general's manor. Also, his tone shifted. An extraordinary woman like you shouldn't be tied down by worldly affairs. We hereby name you the Protector Commandery Princess, with a fief of 1,000 households, and grant you a princess's residence. We hope you can make more contributions to our great Zhou in the future. I looked up in astonishment. Commandery Princess. Me, a merchant's daughter, was actually made a Commandery Princess, breaking all precedent. I instantly understood the emperor's intention. He wanted to completely tie me, and the Qin family, to his war chariot. He saw my value, and he also saw the Qin family's wealth that could rival a nation. He wanted to use the hollow title of a Commandery Princess to lock me down. This goose that lays golden eggs. But then again, wasn't this also what I wanted? With the status of a Commandery Princess, I would have a real protective talisman. Jin and the general's manor would never dare to touch me so easily again. Your humble servant thanks His Majesty for his profound grace. I kowtowed deeply. When I walked out of the imperial palace with the imperial edict, as the nation-protecting Commandery Princess, I knew that my and Jin's positions had been completely reversed. Before, he was high and mighty, and I could only look up to him in my humbleness. Now I am an imperially appointed Commandery Princess, while he is just a young master with a ruined reputation. Between him and me, there is a world of difference. Once the imperial edict was issued, the entire capital was in an uproar. The general's manor became the biggest joke. The Qin family, whom they had tried so hard to curry favor with, not only drew a clear line with them, but the Qin family's daughter also leaped to become a Commandery Princess with a status higher than theirs. She moved into the Commandery Princess's manor bestowed by the emperor. The residence was right next to the imperial palace, and was extraordinarily magnificent. The nation's suppressing general was so angry that he spat blood on the spot and fell ill, never to recover. And Jin, upon receiving the imperial edict, was said to have smashed everything in his study to smithereens. He came to the Commandery Princess's manor to find me. This time, he couldn't even get through the main gate. He stood outside the gate, looking at the gold-gilded Princess Manor plaque, his eyes filled with overwhelming regret and unwillingness. "Qin Ruhua, come out," he roared. I sat in the pavilion in the manor's garden, leisurely sipping tea, listening to a servant report the situation outside the gate. "Let him shout," I instructed lightly. "When his throat gets hoarse, he'll naturally leave." He shouted for the entire afternoon, from furious roars at the beginning to pleading later on. "Ruhua, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Will you come back, please? I'll give you the position of heir apparent. No, I'll give you the entire general's manor. Ruhua, have you forgotten our past? You said you wouldn't marry anyone but me in this life." Listening to these words, I only found them ironic. Yes, I once loved you so much, but how did you treat me? Your love is too cheap, and your regret is too late. He wasn't forcibly carried away by people from the general's manor until it got dark. It is said that he fell gravely ill after returning, with a persistent high fever, constantly shouting my name. And Bai Wangxin's situation was even more miserable. Having lost Jin's protection, and now branded a homewrecker, she completely lost her footing in the capital's circle of noble ladies. The general's wife, my former mother-in-law, vented all her resentment on her, torturing her in every possible way. Truly what goes around comes around. But is this enough? Number the blood feud for the 103 members of my Qin family, the life of my unborn child. How could it possibly be atoned for by making them suffer this little bit of torture? What I want is for them to be doomed beyond redemption. I began to use my status as a Commandery Princess to cultivate my own influence in the imperial court. My elder brother, Chin Mo, performed outstandingly in the disaster relief efforts in Jiangnan, with remarkable political achievements, so I joined forces with several friendly ministers to submit a memorial, strongly recommending him for another promotion. At the same time, I used my memories from my past life to start gathering evidence of General Zheng Guo and Mirong Jin's corruption, law-bending, and cronyism. In my past life, they were able to take down the Qin family flawlessly. In this life, I am going to use the same methods to nail them to the pillar of shame. This process was very long and also very dangerous. Mirong Jin also seemed to have snapped out of his shock. Knowing it was hopeless to beg me, he started to burn his bridges and look for a new patron. He hooked up with the third prince, Xiao Jingyuan. The third prince was ambitious, had always coveted the position of crown prince, and was in need of support from a military family like the general's manor. They began to secretly accumulate power, plotting a huge conspiracy. And all of this was within my expectations. In my past life, it was only by helping the third prince ascend the throne that Mirong Jin ultimately had his meteoric rise, becoming a marquis and prime minister. In this life, I will tear their sweet dream to shreds with my own hands. On the surface, I remained composed, continuing to run my business and expand my commercial empire, but secretly, I anonymously sent all the evidence I had gathered to the Crown Prince in planned batches. The Crown Prince is benevolent, but he is not foolish. Facing the relentless pressure from the third prince and the general's manor, he had long been on alert. My evidence was a timely godsend, allowing him to see his opponent's hand. A smokeless war quietly commenced in the imperial court. Mirong Jin seemed to have sensed something, and he started to become even more frantic. He actually hired assassins to try and kill me. On a dark and windy night, a dozen or so men in black snuck into the princess's manor. But the guards by my side were no longer the ordinary ones from before. Chinnen had recruited top masters from the martial world for me, and the defenses of the princess's manor were impenetrable. The assassins came but never returned. The next day, I had people deliver the dozen or so corpses, along with one living person, to the main gate of the general's manor. In front of all the onlookers, that survivor confessed to every detail, admitting it was Mirong Jin who sent them. Public opinion was in an uproar once again. Hiring killers after failing to divorce, Mirong Jin's character had degenerated to an outrageous degree. The emperor was furious, and ordered Mirong Jin to be thrown into the imperial prison to await his sentence. The Zhengguo general dragged his ailing body to the palace to plead for mercy, but was refused an audience by the emperor. The general's manor was finished. I thought this was already the end, but I didn't expect that the third prince would actually choose to take such a desperate risk just to protect Mirong Jin. He joined forces with the commander of the capital's garrison and launched a palace coup. That night, the sky was ablaze with fire, and the cries of battle echoed throughout the entire capital. Because the princess's mansion was closest to the imperial palace, it was one of the first targets for the rebel army. They wanted to capture me to threaten the emperor and the crown prince. I stood on a high tower in the mansion, coldly watching the dense mass of rebel soldiers outside. "Princess, we'll escort you out through the secret passage," Chinnen said anxiously. I shook my head. "No, I am not leaving." I looked in the direction of the imperial palace, where the fires burned the brightest. "This is my last chance," I muttered to myself. "I will make sure Mirong Jin dies without a burial place, and that the general's mansion is wiped from the face of this earth." I changed into a set of practical martial attire and picked up my long, unused longsword. Before I became Mirong Jin's wife, I Qin Ruhua had also learned martial arts. Though I am no match for the masters of the martial world, it is more than enough for self-defense. Chinnen, gather all the guards. We are not taking the secret passage. We are going to the imperial palace to save the emperor. Princess, it is too dangerous. Fortune is found in danger. I looked at him, my gaze firm. When the nest is overturned, how can any egg remain intact? If the crown prince is defeated today, our Qin family won't survive either. But if we win, the Qin family will be glorious for 100 years. Charge with me, carrying my sword. I was the first to rush out of the princess's mansion. The Qin family guards were inspired by my momentum, their eyes red as they followed behind me, like a sharp dagger plunging fiercely into the rebel army's formation. We fought our way toward the imperial palace. On the way, we encountered the crown prince's guards, scattered by the rebel army. The general leading them was, to my surprise, the fourth prince Xiao Jingyan, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. He had always stayed out of political affairs, an idle prince. But at this moment he was in full armor, holding a long spear, protecting the crown prince. In my past life, because he opposed the third prince's ascension to the throne, he was framed by Murong Jin and sentenced to death with a cup of poisoned wine. He saw me, and a flash of surprise crossed his eyes. "Princess Protector of the Nation, your fourth highness. Your highness the crown prince," I said, cupping my hands. "I have come to the rescue." Seeing the several hundred elite guards I brought, the crown prince was overjoyed. "Good, Princess Qin's loyalty and bravery are commendable. Everyone, follow me and fight our way back to the palace to capture the traitors." With us joining the fray, the situation was instantly reversed. We fought our way back to the Golden Throne Hall. Inside the hall, the third prince had his sword pointed at the old emperor, forcing him to write the Edict of Abdication. And beside him stood a figure I hated to my very bones. Murong Jin. He had actually been broken out of the imperial prison by the third prince. When he saw me, he was first shocked, then his eyes erupted with vicious hatred. "Qin Ruhua, you still dare to come?" "Why wouldn't I dare to come?" I sneered, the tip of my sword pointing straight at him. "I've come to send you off on your final journey. Protect the emperor," the crown prince roared. The two sides instantly started fighting each other. I bypassed the crowd and charged straight towards Murong Jin. He raised his sword and came at me. "Bastard. It is all your fault. You are the one who ruined everything for me." Every one of his moves was vicious, all aimed at my vital points. I calmly parried his attacks. "The one who ruined you is yourself. Your greed, your heartlessness, your ambition, those are the real culprits that pushed you into the abyss. I must have been blind to have fallen for a scumbag like you." "Shut up!" He was enraged by my words, and an opening appeared in his swordplay. I seized the opportunity, and with a flick of my wrist, my longsword shot out like a venomous snake, instantly slashing across his wrist. He let out a blood-curdling scream, and the sword in his hand fell to the ground. I kicked him over, pressing the cold tip of my sword against his throat. He looked at me in terror, his eyes finally showing complete fear and despair. "Ruhua, no, your highness, spare me, for the sake of our marriage." He started begging for mercy. "Husband and wife?" I laughed, an incredibly desolate laugh. "Murong Jin, do you still remember my unborn child? 7 months old, already formed. It was you who personally held that bowl of medicine and forced it into my mouth. As you listened to the sound of it dissolving into bloody water and flowing away, did you feel even a shred of heartache? Do you still remember all 103 members of my Qin family? They were all framed by you, dying tragically under the butcher's knife. When you dream at midnight, do you hear their wails?" My voice was like a curse from the 9 hells, making him tremble all over, his face ashen as death. "Number. It wasn't me, that wasn't me." He stammered incoherently. "Not you?" I leaned down and whispered in his ear. "Murong Jin, I remember every single thing you've done crystal clear, because I am the one who crawled back from hell to claim your life." After speaking, I no longer hesitated and forcefully stabbed down with the longsword in my hand. Fresh blood spurted out, splashing all over my face, warm and cloyingly sweet. Murong Jin's eyes widened, dying with a grievance. Even in death, he would never understand why I knew about things that had not yet happened. And as I watched his body fall, the giant boulder that had crushed my heart for 2 lifetimes finally crashed to the ground. Vengeance is served, the palace coup was quelled. The third prince was stripped of his title and made a commoner, confined for life. All accomplices in the rebellion, including the general's household, had their entire families executed. For my meritorious service in saving the emperor, I was granted the title of Grand Princess, a position of honor second to none. My elder brother, Qin Mo, was also promoted to Minister of Revenue for his merits, truly taking control of the nation's purse strings. The Qin family welcomed unprecedented glory. One day after the dust had settled, the fourth prince, Xiao Jingyan, oh no, now he is the crown prince. Xiao Jingyan found me in the imperial garden. He looked at me, his gaze gentle. "It is all over," I nodded. "What are your plans for the future, Grand Princess?" he asked. I gazed at the distant sky where the clouds gathered and scattered, A scene of complete tranquility. To read 10,000 books and travel 10,000 miles, I suppose, I said softly. To see the misty rain of Jiangnan, the lone smoke of the northern desert. This world is so big, I want to go and see it. The love and hate of my past life, the revenge in this one, have drained my energy for half a lifetime. Now that my vengeance is complete, I just want to live for myself. He was silent for a moment, then suddenly smiled. That is good too. In that case, would you be willing to travel with me? I was stunned, and turned my head to look at him. He stood under a peach blossom tree, dressed in white, looking exceptionally handsome. The sunlight filtered through the gaps in the petals, casting a light on him that was unbelievably gentle. The vast land stretches for thousands of miles. It is too lonely to walk it alone. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a seriousness and anticipation I had never seen before. I looked into his eyes and suddenly smiled, a heartfelt, relaxed smile. Perhaps after experiencing a hellish rebirth, heaven has finally granted me an unexpected tenderness. I didn't answer him, just turned and walked out of the palace. He didn't press for an answer either, just followed behind me at an unhurried pace. The sun was just right, and the breeze was gentle. The road ahead is still long, but this time, I am no longer alone. End of full text.